Welcome to the State of Happiness. I'm your host, Leslie Juvin-Acker, Chief Happiness Officer at Leslie Inc., where we provide solutions for finding happiness for stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed senior-level managers, executives, and entrepreneurs. The State of Happiness podcast offers you conversation, inspiration, and ideas for helping you increase your happiness in the areas of your personal relationships, your career, your abundance, and your emotional well-being. So come along with us on this episode, and we'll help you get the tools, resources, and inspiration you need to help you find your own state of happiness. Today on the State of Happiness, we have the wonderful, the funny Will Sterling. He's an actor in Hollywood as well as a producer on the Straight Talk with Ross Matthews podcast. And today on this first part of a two-part series, we're going to discuss success, how to make yourself memorable, how to find out your goal, and how to prioritize and stay on track in your own state of professional happiness. In our part 2, we're going to be talking about divorce, and Will opens up his heart with us and tells us his story of how he found happiness through divorce and how maybe you can too. Tired of the daily grind and getting nowhere? Do you want to revolutionize your career and your leadership abilities? Whether you want to expand your career in the lifestyle industry or just want to be better where you're at right now, #Drive is the book to help you fulfill your vision. Download your copy of #Drive, essential advice on leadership and career advancement from the lifestyle industry's leading executive coach. Get your copy now at Amazon for your phone, tablet, and desktop. Today we're here with Will Sterling. He's an actor. He's a producer on Straight Talk with Ross Matthews, and he's also the voice and the host of Motivation Report. Thank you so much, Will, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I met you on the Straight Talk with Ross show when I guest hosted, and I read everybody's past lives, and we had some interesting connections between you and Ross yourself, and we had a lot of fun there. But I want to know first and foremost is like, what brought you to Hollywood? What brought you to the show with Ross? And give us a little picture about your journey and how you got there.
I came to LA right after I went to film school at Cal State Long Beach and graduated in 2010 with a degree in film production and wanted to be a writer and a director. But right out of college, I was getting married in summer of 2010 and needed a job. And so I was working part-time at the Gap nearby, and then also got into radio from a film professor of mine, got me a gig there. And that kind of fell into associate producing for radio, which then my boss there hired me over at Podcast One, and that turned into becoming a podcast producer. And at Podcast One, our shows are sort of given to us as producers to be in charge of. And Ross has started with somebody else, and that producer was moving to a different position there in the company, and they basically just shifted the show to me. So I just kind of fell into it, honestly.
Okay. So when you joined the show, was it a little bit of a culture change for you? Did it, shake up your world a little bit and how you saw it? What was that like?
Maybe a little bit, and only in that Ross is very prepared and very hands-on and takes his show very seriously. It's not to say that the other hosts don't, but podcasts are kind of, they can be all over the place. And a lot of the format of the Podcast One shows is kind of like, a celebrity, and then they have guests that come on every week, and it's usually like 45 minutes to an hour, and it always kind of follows the same format.
Right.
But with Ross, he had games, and he had a whole cast of characters, people in the studio, and he had, callers and emails and all of these fans that were just so involved in the show that from a production standpoint, it was such a high energy, very entertaining show. It felt like a morning radio show or like a sort of daytime talk show kind of thing, except there was a lot of audience participation. So it was not a shock, but it was definitely a lot of fun and rewarding to be with somebody who really cared about their content as much as Ross did.
Right.
And our relationship kind of took on like a jokey sort of thing, and that I was the attractive new producer, and he sort of making jokes about our secret relationship and all these kind of things. And even he like emailed me and was like, I just want to make sure you're comfortable with all this stuff. And I was like, of course, I've got a thick skin and I'm a comedian and I've done stand up for many years, and I take nothing personally. And it was kind of funny and sort of added to the humor of the content to just sort of roll with the punches. So
right, because then
that's where that started.
And then I come in and I crush all of his hopes and dreams.
That's very true. Yeah.
Your reaction to that when I said you guys were brothers in a past life was just classic. I think somebody made a GIF of that on Twitter.
It was so funny. Yeah, there's a listener who makes GIFs like every episode. He takes video and makes GIFs out of them. So it goes to show you the audience participation too.
Yeah, obviously. You go from being a producer and you go from that side, and then you come to be a part of the cast, and everybody's really starting to know you. And from that point, you launch off, and you go and you start Motivation Report, and you're also an actor as well. I am, yeah. So what got you in acting, and what about, because everybody, like you said, is an actor in Hollywood, but you look at this and you look at a sea of faces, and for you, what do you think sets yourself apart, or what is it that you want to contribute to, the acting craft, or, the entertainment world?
It's interesting because as an actor also, you're sort of required to get to know you need to know your type. And your type is also shared with many other actors. The type is the thing that is, you are, I'm a, brown-haired white guy who's of an athletic build and is about 5'10". And so I fit into only the things where people are maybe looking for people who are like that. Mm-hmm. And so there's physically not a lot necessarily sets actors apart. There's a lot of handsome guys and a lot of beautiful women, but it's how you are in the room with casting directors, and it's the way that you carry yourself and the way that you present yourself. And I think the energy that you bring to whatever parts you're taking on or whatever things you're auditioning for. An old teacher of mine from film school said, as I was getting into acting, he said, if you're going to do one thing when you go into an audition, just be memorable. Like, that's all you need to worry about, because if you're memorable, you might not book this part, but the casting directors will remember you, that they liked you, and that they'll want to bring you in again. And that's really what you have to do to try to succeed, I think, as an actor, is be memorable, but also you book the room, not the job. So if your goal is to just book the job, you might get it. But if you book the room, then you're building a relationship with these producers and these casting directors, and then that's going to be probably more beneficial in the future, because they're going to call you in more often because they like you.
That's really good advice. And I have to say, just by listening to that alone, that can be applied to any situation. That could be applied to somebody who's applying, who's acting, you're looking for a job, and it could be applied to anybody who's looking for a job, honestly. I think that's really good advice, that don't go into it expecting the job, go into it to make that connection.
Yes, exactly.
So let's dig that a little bit, because I like that. And I think that our listeners here, and especially yours over at Motivation Report, I think that they would really like to know more of those tips and techniques. How do you make yourself memorable? How do you stand out and build those relationships with people? Because that's where, it's kind of like opening the door to your future. Tell me a little bit more about that, so that way we can inspire some other people.
It's all about perseverance, and trying to be memorable and trying to book the room and keeping that mindset is about the fact that you know that you're meant to do this thing and that you're good at this thing. And it's not about putting an expiration date on your success. Because I hear a lot of actors come to LA, or they're just starting out, and they're like, oh, if I don't make it in 3 to 4 years, then I'll go back to Akron, Ohio, or whatever it is. Right. And I'm like, okay, well, then you should probably go back. You should probably go back now, because you might work here and there. But if your goal is if making it means being famous, that's probably not going to happen. But if making it, in my perspective, is just working, like I just want to work, it's not necessarily about, it would be a dream to be a working actor, in that I can pay my bills on that craft alone. Right. I still have a day job, and the day job is podcast production. So I'm lucky that my day job is also entertainment related, and gives me an opportunity to still stretch those muscles and use those talents. But at the same time, like, you have to keep focused on this thing that you want. And I think Bryan Cranston, from Breaking Bad,
Right.
Said, if you really want to do this, you have to be prepared to sleep on your friends' couches until you're 65.
Yeah.
Because you never know, you know what I mean? And if the goal is to work, then you have to keep at it. If the goal is to just become famous, then you could become famous doing anything else.
Right.
And it's a little different. Do you believe in the art and the craft of it? And for me, acting is that, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily about the recognition of how great you are. It's that I like to entertain people and I like to perform, but artistically, I also like to express, and I like to go places that I wouldn't go as a normal person, and do things that you wouldn't do as a normal person. And really, at the end of the day, it's just playing make-believe as an adult.
Right.
And that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. I like how you say to people, don't go into it expecting like instant success, because
Right.
it's like, and I'm sure you've heard this, but it takes like 20 years to be an overnight success, for a lot of people. And,
Yep.
and people don't realize, like, as you said, like perseverance and persistence and sticking with it is so important. And especially in Hollywood and in an industry, like you said before, it can be so flaky. It's really important to say that. So for you, what would you say, just for you, what are your daily priorities when it comes to your career? And I wouldn't say getting a big break, but, making those important steps. What would you say are your priorities every day to focus yourself, to keep you on the right path?
Yeah, you have to keep creating. If the goal is to be an artist and create, whether that be through performance or otherwise, you have to do it. You can't get better at something if you're not practicing at it,
Right.
and I do like, exercise and fitness and stuff. So I equate a lot to like a sort of gym mentality, which is, if you've never been to a gym before and you walk into the gym and you're like, today I'm going to bench press 250 pounds. Everyone is going to be like, today, the first day that you came to the gym, like, that,
Right.
it's not going to happen today. But if you work at it a little bit every day, eventually maybe you can bench press 250, whatever it is.
Right.
The number could be different depending on the person. But so you can't expect to just begin something and then be great at it. You have to do it bit by bit every day and do it consistently. And so for me, whether that's stand-up or improv or being in comedy sketches or filming my own short films, or writing with by myself or with a writing partner. And now the podcast is another extension of my creativity. Some of it is more sort of motivational speaking, but then every once in a while I'll do little, like I did a Christmas episode with a bunch of sketches and music and a little bit more expressive. So it's always finding avenues for how you can, one, continue to express so you don't feel stifled and you don't feel like nothing's happening. And two, so you can continue to hone that craft, because the more you use it and the more practice you have, the better you'll be and the more prepared you'll be.
Right, because what you're saying, honestly, now this is coming from my perspective, because I also coach high performers and people who are millionaires and very successful people. And the thing is that you don't just reach a point and you stop doing all those things. That stuff continues to happen after you've got your big break, or you've got that $1 million check, or that big bonus or whatever. So what you're saying is basically going, well, don't expect to stop creating once you reach a certain point, because that is the path, that's the way.
Right. It's the same, like I said, jokingly with gym and fitness related things. If you were like, okay, my goal weight is this and my ability is to lift this much weight, and you got there, you can't just be like, okay, now I don't have to work out anymore because I'm jacked and I have a six pack and I'm good to go for the rest of my life. It's like, no, you still have to come to the gym every day to maintain it and to keep it and to continue finding where you can, not to relate everything to fitness, but that's kind of something I found a couple of years ago and was able to sort of draw parallels between that, getting in shape and feeling good about myself, and having that be connected to what I feel like is the truth is hard work plus time is always going to equal results, but the time is always going to be a variable. And it could be a week, it could be a year, it could be 10 years, you never know. But you have to keep putting the hard work and the time in, and you will eventually see results.
Well, I mean, you see a lot of metaphors in fitness as well, repetition and persistence and, going every day and, putting on the weight and, carrying all the, shouldering stuff. I mean, you hear a lot of this metaphors for, the journey of success and that advancement of yourself. You can't just go in there, like you said, and just expect to lift 250 pounds, which is unrealistic. We
Right.
have to, dream big, but at the same time, be realistic about that path. So it's really interesting that you bring this back to anything. Honestly, it's not just acting or fitness. It could be anything that anybody is doing, because we all have our own individual creative expression, whether or not it's in the quote unquote creative business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We'll be right back, folks. Thanks for joining us at the State of Happiness podcast. Now, you can get happiness tips and news directly into your inbox each week with the State of Happiness newsletter. Receive special offers and invitations to exclusive online events. Go to leslieinc.org and sign up right now for the State of Happiness newsletter. So my question for you is I met you through Ross, and I had a lot of fun, and I think you're very talented. But I was especially surprised to hear the motivation report, because I didn't learn about it until I Googled a little bit about you and got on your Twitter and was like, oh, let me learn a little bit about you. And then I listened to several of your podcasts, and I was like, wow, this guy's very insightful. He's you're not like somebody who's going out there. You're not like me, who's actually trained in like motivation. You're not, you're not traditionally trained in these things. You are, in a way, a journeyman of who's going in, and you're talking about real issues. You talk about, you talk about sex, you talk about, relationships, most recently, you talked about what was going on in Charlottesville with CJ, who's also on the show, Ross. And you talk about hard pressing issues. And you even say in one of your episodes, if I were to write this self-help book, it would be, don't buy this bleeping self-help book.
Yeah, don't buy this effing book. Yeah.
So you take us into that. Like, what was it that you saw a lack in the world of podcast or self-help or, motivational content? What was it that you saw that was lacking, that you're like, somebody needs to say this? And what was it that launched you there in Motivation Report?
To me, and it took me a while to really find my authenticity within the podcast, because when I first started, I was scripting all of my episodes and writing them out, because one, I like the writing process, and I still do that periodically and script out episodes because I like to do it. But then I do a lot of off the cuff kind of motivational speaking, and that I think starting to do it off the cuff and discover myself authentically as one who can motivate led to this feeling like I always loved listening to motivational speakers. I always loved on YouTube, people would take like movie quotes from like Rocky and a bunch of stuff and cut it to like epic music, and you'd listen to it like before a workout and feel like just makes you feel good. Right. And one of my favorite speakers is, he calls himself a hip hop preacher, Eric Thomas. And he's got a very urban style, and he's very matter of fact, and he yells a lot, you know what I mean? He's like in your face kind of thing. And he's very cut and dry, but then his whole big thing is like, I don't swear, I don't talk about sex, I don't talk about any of these things. And then I started to see this trend that no matter how people presented themselves as motivational speakers, it seemed like there were still topics that they didn't really get into the nitty gritty on, which people deal with on a day-to-day basis. Right. And motivation, to me, listening to all these other speakers, I could only go so far with them. They could only take me on my own journey so far before I would sort of feel like I would leave them. And I can check back in with them. I still listen to speeches from other speakers, and Les Brown is another one that I really like. And there's just a lot of guys that you discover on YouTube and TED Talks and things like this. But I was like, there's something about the world, and everybody's different, and we're beautiful because of it. And yet we're not embracing the fact that that's what we should talk about, and found a way to motivate one another through our differences and embrace the things that we think about every day. People swear in their day-to-day. People talk about sex. Even if it's taboo and you're not supposed to, you're thinking about it. Sorry, that's your biology. You know what I mean? Like, that's the truth. Right. And I always had this weird feeling that, like, how come so many motivational speakers present this image of what I felt was kind of unrealistic? Like, why don't they just present themselves as one among the masses, not one above the masses? And to me, it's more effective to motivate people by being in the thick of it and helping to pick them up, as opposed to being on a stage above everyone and talking down to people, whether that be literal or metaphorical. And it's not to begrudge anybody or say that they're doing it the wrong way. Everybody has their own path and their own way. But I always kind of imagined myself just one among everybody. And I'm like, no, I'm just like you. And the way that I can help motivate you and you can help motivate me in return is if I know that we're on the same level. I'm no more or less special than you. I have different gifts and different techniques. But as a human being, we're all very similar, despite the fact that we're all very different. You know, we all bleed red, but yet you could be lesbian, gay, bi, transgender. You could be black, white, Asian, anything. So that's what I wanted to get to. And I just felt like I didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. And I was even very open and honest about my divorce. You know what I mean? There's this feeling like a lot of motivators are sort of put on this pedestal sometimes because they're wise or they seem like a guru, and they don't share a certain amount about their personal lives because it could affect the way that people see them. And I'm like, no, people need to know that I'm going through exactly what they're going through, and we can actually get through it together.
Oh, I love that. You know, it's really interesting because I think that we kind of found each other in that way, because I agree in the same way as you. And that when I would see these motivational speakers or coaches or whatever, and I'm going like, where's the humanity in all this? You know,
right.
And in my sessions with my clients, and I have hundreds of clients that are regularly seeing me, and in my sessions, I talk about my personal life. I tell them about, you know, the conflicts in my marriage, and I tell them how we got through it. I'll tell them that what I was stuck on, and how I curse in session. I don't curse in my recordings because my clients tell me they listen to it with their kids. But but in session, I'll do anything to like shock them out of a state, because people just get so stuck. You know, we get stuck in all our crap, and it's nice and refreshing to be in front of somebody who says, you know, I get stuck too. I have relationship issues as well. I get impatient, or I want to throw this person out the window as well. And,
right.
and it's just like looking at this like, okay, well then cool. Then how do you get through it? Because it is unrealistic. It's kind of like, you know, these religious people, especially in, you know, Christianity and Catholicism, and, which is my background, you know, growing up, Pentecostal, very
That's
very
mine
religious.
too. Yeah.
Oh, really? Pentecostal?
Oh, okay. No, I was Church of Christ, but they had their own set of crazy psychotic things that I did.
So you know, you go back in and, you know, like Jesus wasn't an infallible being, you know, and for me, my take on the Bible is you see the evolution of a soul. For me, I see Jesus as Adam, you know, it's the soul that fell away, and then you go through many incarnations. I think that's how I see it now. And you can see a soul who goes from lifetime to lifetime, and you see where he messed up. You see where he, you know, screwed himself over and hurt other people and started wars. And you see he finally makes it to the end where he's like, oh my God, you know, it's all about unconditional love. And being along with somebody on that journey, I can hear you in your podcast. You journey through your own thoughts rather than going and saying, you know, which is okay, you know, some people want straightforward advice, but then you go into it and you think your way through an issue.
Yeah, that's what I started doing. And a lot of my friends are like, your episodes are too long. And I'm like, but I'm discovering it as I'm saying it out loud. So that's why, you know, a motivational speech, which should be 15 to 20 minutes on a specific issue, like your worth, finding your worth as a person, we could do that in 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes. I did it in 45 minutes because I was like, I'm just going to start talking and we'll see what happens. And I think that's how the human brain works a lot too. You know, you don't have the answers. And then if we can find the answers in 45 minutes together, like that's amazing.
Right. And 45 minutes just to come up to something life-changing. Good God. Like how impatient are we?
Right. Well, everybody, you know, the YouTube attention span is something like 7 seconds. So it's pretty difficult.
Give me life answers in 2 minutes or less.
Make me skinny with this diet pill.
I know. It's very interesting because you think through it. And I agree with you, because even for me, you know, as an intuitive, and people come in and they say, hey, I'm starting to see these different things. And the client's looking at me sometimes and like, I don't know what that means or where that, and I'll say to him or her, let's not make it fit. Let's not try to push it and make it seem clear. Like, let's see where it goes. And it's almost like as you get an idea, you get a puzzle piece after puzzle piece after puzzle piece, and then you step back and then you're like, oh, I get it. Where writing is kind of like we go through the process as writers, and then we come back and then we set the themes so that way that people know where to follow us. But session and your podcast, an example, it's kind of like the inverse process. It's like, we're going to talk about this and then we'll come up to the answer at the end.
Yeah, because I know what the theme and the basic topic is, and if you can just kind of circle around it enough, eventually you'll find the center of it, and then you can go towards it, and then you have it.
Right. Yeah. So it's very logical, the way that people go, it's very logical, but it's also intuitive as well, because you kind of reach for these things. I mean, you don't preach yourself to be an intuitive or anything like that, but you do use your feelings and your empathy.
Right. And that was a big thing too for me and this might seem sacrilegious to many people, but ever since I was a kid, I grew up Christian and still in many ways call myself a red letter Christian, because a lot of what Jesus preached is still very relevant about, loving your neighbor as yourself and loving God and just being good to one another. That all still works for me. The man-made stuff is the stuff that doesn't, and the rules that are created, as a result of the times. It's still a historical document. It's not necessarily meant to be taken literally today. I don't think so.
Right.
And so you have this person who comes into the world who, when I grew up, it was like, oh, Jesus is God. You know what I mean? That they're one and the same, and the sacrifice is important, and it's all about sacrifice and all this kind of stuff. And then one day I read a book by Marcus J. Borg called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time, he's kind of another kind of person that people in the church community see as sacrilegious, because he doesn't believe that Jesus is divine. He believes that Jesus is a person. And that was just something that I had never considered, as I was like, even though the spirituality of it is still kind of the magical part, if you remove that, what are you left with? And if removing the divinity from Jesus means that he doesn't have worth, then he's not really a real person. But if Jesus is just a man who makes a conscious decision and knows how difficult it's going to be, and he, despite the fact that it's the unpopular opinion and that he's probably going to die for it, decides anyway to go through life and help people and preach love and preach peace and understanding, and gets to the end of his life where he's praying in the garden and says, God, if there's any other way, let that be the way. And he's like, okay, there's no other way. I got to do it. I got to give my life for my cause. And he does. Right. And it's more amazing to me for a human being to make those decisions than for God to make those decisions, because God is God and can do whatever God wants. So I was like, oh, interesting. So I can make decisions because I'm a person. And
yeah, you are a person.
Well, of course, but I can be connected to God in a way that Jesus or any prophet or any person claims to be, but not hold myself above everybody. I just never understood why people said oh, I get messages from God, and people took them seriously when they could see that it was hurting people. And I said, how come I can't claim that I get messages from God and you take me seriously when I say that you're taking people down a path where people are getting hurt and it's actually about love? So I just decided, I was like, screw it. I'm just going to start doing it for myself and claiming these things of myself. Not that I'm a prophet, but that I'm somebody who has an understanding, and I want to share that understanding. And the goal is to help you find your own understanding and make that authentic to you. It's not going to be the same between us.
Right. I'm a big proponent for reincarnation. I don't know if you're familiar with Edgar Cayce. Do you know who that is?
I don't know.
Okay, so I think this will be fun for you to explore, because if you're into reading and exploring the metaphysical and the occult, I think he's fabulous. So I actually just did a reading because I channel my spirit guides, so it's a little bit different from reading past lives or channeling or whatever. So I am a direct channeling. So I see words in my head, I type and write them down. I don't talk them out loud because I get too distracted, but I type them down. So yesterday for the eclipse, I want to know, well, what does this eclipse mean? So Edgar Cayce is one of my spirit guides, but he was a real dude who lived at the turn of the century. He died right after World War II, and he was a sleeping psychic, and he produced thousands upon thousands of accurate life readings, health readings, based in his Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. Thousands. He is the most confirmed psychic in the world, validated. And
wow.
And he went into a trance, and he would connect your energy, and he would tell you what's going on with your health, prescribe ways to heal you or to correct your energy imbalances, whether if it's through relationships or spiritual or actually taking a medicine or something, and getting health stuff. He's famous for his health readings, and he was very accurate. I mean, Johns Hopkins University did a lot of studies and validated his readings. So he's very validated psychic in the world renowned. And so he steps through, and I channel him, and he talks about all these things that are going on. But the interesting thing about Edgar Cayce is he also talks about the evolution of the soul, and he talks about the evolution of consciousness and the Christ consciousness. And he says that Jesus was the first soul that comes down, and he fell, and he was Adam. And he says the Bible is the book of life. It is the book of Jesus' incarnations, the most major one, where he goes from falling from the Godhead and becoming individuated, and then finding his way back home. And you see, he was supposed to be, he was like, he was Adam, he was Joshua, Joshua, and he was, I don't know if you know Bible, but he was a Melchizedek who wrote the Songs of Solomon. He was, I think it was Elijah, and then Ishmael, I think, and then he goes, and then he becomes all these different personalities in the Bible, and then he finally assumes the image of Jesus as the man. And what he says, Edgar Cayce, is that the Bible is a journey of one soul finally making it through all the different ages, like the age of the Taurus, and the age of the Pisces, and then now we're in the age of Aquarius, and Jesus says, I'll meet you there in the consciousness. And what I agree with you, because you said, Jesus is a guy, but the Christ is the consciousness, and we are all capable of that. And if we we remember to tap into that, and that means, and I think Jesus' dying on the cross was really much about self-immolation, but it was the death of the ego, and because we are so afraid of killing the ego that the ego always sets ways for it to survive. It doesn't want to die. Right. So, and the ego is simply the mind, and the mind is the builder of consciousness. With our mind and that power, we can create whatever we want, but we misuse it all the time. And so he says, if we can tap into that consciousness, we can manifest instantly, we can be in love, and we will be on that right path. It's kind of like the Christ consciousness is our compass, where the mind is supposed to be the builder, but we let the mind take over, and it's mindlessly just tapping into all these programmings that we get from kids, or even as children from our parents, or even past lives, and we are mindless. So tapping into that consciousness is really what it's all about. And I think that you're pretty much, even though without knowing anything about Edgar Cayce, you just described what this guy said in his readings.
Right, and that's the interesting thing too, is it's like, if there is this collective unconsciousness, we can find ways to access it without having a specific background. We all do have access to it and can find it in our own ways, and it seems accidental, but at the same time, it's like, no, anybody, if you're a Buddhist or you're a Muslim or you're Sikh or you're, you have any type of other religion besides Christianity, it's kind of, I guess I've become a bit of a Unitarian, because it's this feeling that all paths lead to the center. And the center is this sort of collective unconsciousness that we all share, and you can access it. You just have to be willing, like you said, to sacrifice the ego and get out of the way of the blockages. And I think the blockages are the man-made things, where it's like, no, women have to be this way in church. And you're like, why?
Boo.
Right. And even as a kid, my grandparents went to a church where they were the first church I'd ever been to where they were open to the LGBTQ community, and they had instruments in church and guitars and pianos and all that stuff. And my church only believed in a cappella music. And I remember going back home one summer and asking an elder, it wasn't even my dad, it was like one of the church elders. I was like, how come we don't have cool instruments and stuff in church? And he opened the Bible and read to me like the passage that was meant to prove it. And I was like probably 13 years old at the time. And I remember like looking at him and smiling at him and being like, thanks. But in my head, I was like, that doesn't say what you think it says. And that sort of broke my, started making me question everything and question the way that the book was interpreted. And I felt the book was being interpreted in order to take advantage of and oppress people, either in big ways or in little ways. But like women were not allowed to pray out loud in the church that I grew up in. You could not have a woman pastor. And I was like, I don't understand why. That sounds stupid. And they was like, well, this is the reason why in the book. And I was like, I understand that this is a 2,000-year-old thing. This is not the same time. And I just sort of broke from it myself and kind of started down this path of discovering things on my own. And I feel like I found the same center. I've never felt more connected to whatever God is than now, but I don't claim to have the answers and tell people how, dictate how people should live their lives, because that's what God wants. I don't speak for God. I'm here to act and try to do my best, to represent the greatest good that can be represented, but I'm not God, so I won't claim to say like, this is what he wants or she wants. I'm like, no, this is what I want. And I feel like it's authentic. It feels like it's good. It feels like it's right because I'm not hurting anybody. So I'm just going to do it.
Right. Well, you look at logic, and logic is very brain-centered, and logic is just a mechanism for us to process information, where most of our intuitive feelings comes from our heart space. You look at different cultures all throughout history, and even the Egyptians, for example, they take more importance over the weight of the heart than I think, maybe I read this somewhere. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think they took the brain out and they kind of just threw it away, where the heart was like the most important thing,
Right.
And for me, in my work, when I'm working with a client, I believe just from my work and my research alone that every organ produces an emotion, and the heart is that of love. And when I ask people, if you hear something from me, from spirit, if I'm talking to you and I channel something, if it feels right, if it feels strong for you, then that's most likely the truth. But if it feels hollow, that it's probably not, and the way to do that is to just weigh out your own feelings. That's why I think it's so interesting that we literally say feeling, to feel it, if it's positive and it has weight to it, or if it's negative and it's hollow. It's very interesting how we guide ourselves intuitively just by the weight of something.
Right.
So
it's fascinating. And
so for me, my question for you is that, you're going through some personal changes yourself, and how do you navigate through your heart? How does that work for you? I mean, with the divorce, you were married for a good moment of time. Now, how do you navigate
We were married for 7 years, but I've known her since I was 10, and we were high school sweethearts and together for 12 years. And I struggled for sure. And we got married. She was 21 and I was 22. Mm-hmm. And now at 28, 29, we've just kind of grown into different people, but not in a way that we feel like we've grown apart entirely. We still want to be in each other's lives. We've been in each other's lives for too long that we can't just say like, oh, this is the end. We'll never see each other again.
If you want to hear the rest of this interview, stay tuned for part 2 of this 2-part series with Will Sterling. He's going to open up about his marriage, his divorce, and how he became a better person and a happier man through his divorce. A many thanks to you, happy campers, for joining us today on this episode of The State of Happiness. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join me at Twitter at Leslie Juvin, as well as follow at Leslie Inc. on Instagram, and talk with us at Facebook at Official Leslie Inc. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to leave us a rating and subscribe and share with a friend. As always, thanks for joining us, and remember, a smile goes a long way. If you are ready to find your state of happiness, then a State of Happiness guide pack will get you there. 1 state, 4 destinations. These unique one-on-one coaching packages with me, Leslie Juvin-Acker, can help you reach your goals, dramatically improve your self-confidence, and create the life and career you want. Learn more about Leslie Inc. guide packs at leslieinc.org/gethappy. Watch the informational video, select a guide pack, and change your life in as little as 1 day. It's that easy. Leave the rest to me, because I'm your guide in the state of happiness.